Welcome to Eastlake. We are an inclusive faith community dedicated to the free search for truth and meaning, seeking to live out a more just and life-giving spirituality in the modern world. We see faith as less about doctrines and dogmas demanding total agreement, but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others. What unites us is a growing awareness that life is a gift and love is the point. We welcome the entire human family, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So if you are curious and have come to see, if you are tired and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to share, if you are journeying and have come to grow, if you are wounded and have come to heal, if you are joyful and have come to shine, welcome home. Today, we hear from Bart Campolo as he continues our series, Do You Believe in God? Please check the description for links to our quarterly Spotify playlist and guided meditation.
Thanks everybody for being here. Welcome back to an Eastlake event. It's been, couple minutes, couple months. Actually, it's been a couple years. Okay, 2 full years. Crazy. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. We are super glad that you're here. If we've never met before, thanks for showing up tonight. My name is Peter. I think I've met most of you, but there's also a number of you that I've never met. So thanks for attending a random event at a water treatment center. If you've ever been around Eastlake, this is actually raising the bar for quality because we have low standards in this place. So thanks so much for showing up on a random Sunday night in Bothell, Washington to attend this event. Tonight, I do want to welcome everybody, and I want to share, it's been 2 years since Eastlake has had an in-person event, which is crazy. 2 whole years. March of 2020, we were in a series on the Enneagram. Gary Hale was speaking. He was the last Sunday, good old Gary, and then we shut it down for a long time. And so this is kind of the first foray back into an in-person event with people that might call themselves an Eastlaker. Some of you have been around Eastlake for a decade. Others of you have I just followed you online and I decided to show up this random thing tonight. Or I know one of you showed up because you've heard of Bart and you follow his podcast. I love all that. So thanks so much for being here tonight. I did just want to share, I help kind of facilitate Eastlake with a great friend, somebody who's been around Eastlake for the last decade as well, Kristin Birchinall. And we're going to show a video from Kristin. So Kristin, unfortunately, tonight wanted to attend, but she got COVID. And it turns out it's just the worst luck ever. Kristin's in the top 3 people I know that are least likely to get COVID, extraordinarily careful. And it's just the most terrible luck that she is not able to be here tonight. But she did record a video for us because she's fantastic. And she is kind of the brainchild alongside me in terms of keeping Eastlake going at some level for the last couple of years. So I do want to show the video. So are you able to play that video real quick? I'm going to have everybody hear from Kristin just for a quick minute here.
Well, hello there. I am so sad to not be there tonight with you guys. I have COVID, which is so ironic considering that I have been the person that's been most holding out on what's risky and what's not, and have not gone to a restaurant in 2 years and been so scared of it. And then finally I was okay, it's over. It's kind of done. We can do stuff now. And then I get COVID 2 days before the party. I'm especially bummed because tonight is such a special night. It's been such a long time since we've seen each other. And I just really wanted to be there. I wanted to be there to give hugs and say hello face to face. Peter and I have been talking often over the last 2 years, what is this thing? And who are these, numbers on our screens of people who download the messages and watch the messages? Who are these viewers and people who still find this helpful? It was so important to me to be able to see you and to say thank you. Thanks for sticking with us over the last 2 years, and to talk to you about what do you think? What did you like? What kinds of stuff do you want to hear about? All of those things. So I just really, really wish I could be there, but I don't want to get you sick. So here I am at home. Also, please send help because we're on day 2 of 10 days and my whole family is going crazy. And my husband says he feels trapped and my kids are bored. So please, SOS, send help. But I hope you guys have a blast tonight. I'm so jealous you get to hear from Bart in person. I wish I could for that too. But just know that I'm really thankful for you. I'm thankful for this community. We don't know what lies ahead, but we know we're always going to be willing to experiment and try new things. And as the landscape of spiritual life and spiritual communities is changing all over the world, sped up by the pandemic, we get excited about those opportunities, the chance to do something new and different, and but still stay the same, which is we've always wanted to provide meaningful content that helps you cultivate the kind of life that leads you to be a better, more loving person. And so we're going to keep trying to do that. Who knows where it will take us, but we're glad that you're along for the ride with us. So thanks for being there tonight. Virtual hugs to all of you, and I hope I do get to see you again in the not so distant future.
So nice, right? That's a great video. I texted her. She did a great job. Again, pretty bad luck. COVID is going around. So that said, it's true. It's just really bad luck. We have canceled an event. We were going to do one in the fall and then Omicron. So we pushed it and we decided we're going to wait and then we gear up for this and then Kristin can't join. So all that said, thanks for being here tonight. As Kristin said, I kind of want to just jump and echo what she communicated, which is that we're thankful that people would attend and we're thankful that you would show up on a random Sunday night. I think the headline for what is next for Eastlake, I want to do a quick intro because we're going to hear from Bart in a minute. And the primary thing we're doing tonight, we wanted to create a half an hour, 45 minutes for you to go talk to other humans. For some of us, we haven't done this in a really long time in person. I'm not sure how many 50 to 80 person events you've been to in the last year, but it's probably fewer than you went to in 2019. And so for some of us, it might feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, I have to work out these muscles, the mingling muscles that I haven't used in a long time. So we wanted to create some time for people to do that and connect. Hopefully it's a chance to connect with people that you maybe knew in life pre-COVID. And for others of us, maybe it's a chance to meet brand new people that are like-minded and share some Eastlake values. But the headline for tonight, what we wanted to do was kind of continue the experiment. Eastlake, the way that I describe it is it's a pretty mediocre church over the years, but it's a fantastic experiment. And so in terms of things that if you look about the history of Eastlake, plenty of failure, plenty of mistakes, plenty of things that are interesting, you went that route. But ultimately a pretty special community and a special, I think, set of values that help people, I think, live meaningfully. And so I listened to a podcast the other day. I'm sure you're listening to content. Everybody is sharing podcasts. And I have to shout out my sister, Susie, who sent this podcast. I made her sit in the front row like a true family member. But she shared a podcast talking about the next way, what is spirituality in the future. And it was a discussion about how religion isn't ending. Religion isn't over. It's just in transformation. People haven't stopped getting married. People haven't stopped celebrating new life, celebrating the death of people who lived a great life. People haven't stopped, celebrating meaningful moments and marking meaningful moments. Just the environment in which those meaningful moments are happening, the church doesn't own those exclusively. There's a lot of other ways people are living out those values. People are still raising funds for friends who are going through a medical challenge or who have cancer. You don't need the church to do that. You don't need a specific religious institution to do that. You can do that in a lot of ways. A lot of those things are happening online. A lot of those things are happening in workplaces. They're happening everywhere. So the church doesn't own those things. It's just in transformation. And so I think as we're, as Kristin communicated, we don't necessarily know what the future of Eastlake looks like, but we thought there's a semi-strong chance that there's a group of people that might want to get together for some beer and desserts. There's a semi-strong chance that if you were really interested in going to Sunday morning services 9:30 and 11, you'd be doing that somewhere else. that maybe you're interested in that, and that's okay. And that maybe you are attending another spiritual community in the mornings on Sundays regularly, and you also want to go to this, which is totally awesome. But I've had a number of conversations with Eastlakers over the last couple of years who are saying, you know what? It's been kind of nice to not have Sunday morning commitments, and I've really enjoyed that, and I don't see myself going back to that. So we're trying to figure out, okay, if that's not the model, what does the model look like? What does the next experimental wave of what a spiritual community look like? What do they do? How many times they get together? What type of stuff do they do? So I just want to let you know that we're continuing to experiment. Tonight is in and of itself an experiment. We didn't know who would attend. We didn't know who would RSVP. And like RSVPing on a random survey is different than actually showing up in person and being like, I'm going to go into that room and I'm going to go talk to some people I haven't talked to in 2 years. So the fact that you showed up in and of itself is kind of a courageous move. Thanks for doing that. And I guess I just wanted to kind of start the evening by saying that we're going to keep experimenting with what this spiritual community is. We don't know what the model will look like in the next chapter, but we did think, let's do a party or two, see who attends, and see if we can have some interesting conversations with friends, people who are like-minded, and then hopefully hear from some interesting people on a question: do you believe in God? So we invited our friend. Can you believe that we tricked Bart to coming to our first in-person gathering in Bothell, Washington? He lives in Cincinnati, but somehow we tricked him into coming all the way out here. So can we welcome Bart up here? What's helpful? Do you want some space for your notes?
I'm just going to set something down, yeah.
Okay.
Hi. I'm so glad to see you. You're like my parents in the sense that every time I see you, you're a little smaller.
That's good. Did you save that one for us?
No, I just made that up.
That's a good one. That's a really good bit.
Yeah.
That's a really good bit. Hey, before we give you too much content, or we send you on the rabbit trail, a couple things. We wanted to make this kind of interactive and a little bit of a Q&A. So if you have questions, so ultimately I'm going to hopefully throw some quarters in the jukebox of do you believe in God? That's what we're talking about tonight. By the way, we post all of our content online. If you're not following, smash that subscribe button. And I'm just kidding. I hate that sentence. It makes me laugh so much. But if you want to ask Bart a question, you can go, there you go. You can scan this QR code. Those are very COVID friendly. It turns out everybody loves them. But you can also go to eastlakecc.com/Q&A if you want to throw a question in there. We'll make Bart answer it on the spot, lightning round style.
Yeah. It's so sad that in a room this small, we can't just
You can also
no, couldn't do that.
By the way, you totally can do that.
Okay.
If you want to do that.
I just want because if you don't know how to use the QR code, which as I don't, I think it would be good for you to know you can, Oh, really? I messed it up? I'm sorry.
It's okay. We'll find it.
Man.
We'll find it. Technology is the best. By the way, Tom, did you send me the questions if people send them in so I can see them? That'd be great. Thank you. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to answer the question or do you want to share other stuff first?
I really am grateful to be here. And I don't know, some of you I've seen before because I've been here a few times before. And every time I come, I say, I'm so glad to be here. And I mean it every time. Partly because you're lovely and partly because I used to be a really big-time Christian speaker who got invited to speak all over the world. And then I lost my faith and nobody invites me anywhere anymore. And so I'm happy to be anywhere.
Your standards got lower. Your standards went way down.
Yeah. So that's kind of the theme of the evening. Standards just reducing. Which probably I may have given away my answer to the question. But, I told my wife, they want me to come out and give a talk based on do you believe in God? She's like, it'll be the shortest talk you've ever given. No, thank you very much. What's that? At a wastewater. Yeah. So I really did think about as we were talking about this, I thought about I'm like a lot of you, probably, in the sense of I grew up and for a large chunk of my time, I didn't just believe in God, I really believed in God. I mean, I was all the way in. And over the course of my life, I went through a process. And people often, especially when I first came out as a post-Christian, people often wanted to hear, what was the process by which you lost your faith? I think that was like a cautionary tale. People were like, wow, if you could lose your faith, you used to preach to thousands of people, you were really into it, you lived in the inner city and worked with the poor, you seemed really sincere. And they're like, and you were lying all along. And I wasn't. I really believed in God. And I didn't just believe in God. I had faith in God. And there's a difference. There's a book that's out right now that I think is really good. It's written by a woman named Tanya Luhrmann. She's a social scientist, and it's called Making God Real, How We Make God Real. And as a social scientist, she studied all these faith groups. And what she found was, it wasn't about like how we make up a belief system. Anthropologists have known that for a long time, the process by which we come up with these stories that we tell. And that doesn't mean they're not true, that we came up with them. They just know like different religions, how it comes. She's not talking about that. She says, that's a belief system. She said, the question really is, how do we manufacture faith? And by that, she means that lived experience where you go like, no, I don't just believe in God. I talk to God. I felt God. I heard the voice of God. I saw a vision. When you're a post-Christian who comes into kind of like prominence in the secular community, a lot of the atheist speaker types, I know all those people, the podcasters, they would have me on their shows and stuff. And sometimes they would sort of ask me these questions, like they would mock me, and they would say, oh, you must be so embarrassed. Talking about like, when you heard the voice of God, or you preaching sermons about how you felt the leading of the Holy Spirit, And I was like, no, I don't believe in God anymore. But I had those experiences. Like I felt something, I heard something. That stuff was real. When I was out on a hillside with 100 kids and we were all lighting our candles and singing, I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice. Our God is an awesome God. I felt something like that was, a social scientist might call it collective effervescence. I don't know what you would call it. Neuroscientists would call it, but the fact of the matter is it was real. And in her book, Tanya Luhrmann writes about like how much energy and how much work and how much preparation goes into creating experiences where God is real. And she goes and visits some religious communities and she spends a lot of time with them and she has a couple of religious experiences. She's a total atheist. She's like, I saw something. I felt something. I was with this Wiccan community and I saw black things in my hotel room one night. And she's like, I had entered into their practices. And the music was there, and the movement was there, and I was saying the words, and I was going through the motions, and the thing happened. And she's like, that it doesn't mean it was there, but I saw it. And I think that that's a really important thing when if you're going to be in a community of people who have a varying set of understandings about this stuff, who have different levels of woo that they can tolerate. It's really important that you understand, that you have respect. Not just for somebody else's beliefs, but for their experience. And that's why, I always say to my secular friends, I'm sorry you haven't had any transcendent experiences. If you haven't, you probably just haven't used the right drugs. You haven't fallen in love with the right partner. You haven't been to the top of the right mountain. You haven't been in the crowd when they scored the right touchdown, because like those experiences are real and they happen. And so I think like when you ask that question, like, do you believe in God? Do I believe that there is a supernatural being that makes things happen on this earth? I don't. And I'm going to be happy to tell you how and why I don't believe in that reality, but I don't actually think I can take any credit for what I believe. I didn't choose not to believe in God. I just don't. I can't. I could, but I can't. And you say, well, why did you change your mind? No, I didn't change my mind. My mind was changed. It's a big difference. I couldn't change my mind. I don't think you could change your mind. I mean, even if you were motivated, believe me, I was motivated to believe in God. I had a good thing going believing in God. My life would be so much simpler if I still believed in God. As motivated as I was, there came a moment when I couldn't do it anymore. I could have lied about it, but I couldn't really do it. And you don't choose what you believe. I mean, even if you're motivated, I could put a gun to Peter's head right now. I could put a gun to your head.
Please don't.
Yeah. And I could say, I need you to believe in Islam. I need you to believe that Muhammad flew on a horse from Mecca to Medina in one night, the whole Islamic thing, the Quran, the whole thing. I need you to believe in it. And if you don't, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill all these people in this room. Be highly motivated. And I could put you on a lie detector test and say, do you believe that the Quran is the absolute truth? And you would fail that test. You don't choose what you believe. So your mind can change, but you can't change it. I think it's a really important thing to understand when you're in a conversation about this stuff. There's a question, isn't there, as to whether or not you're going to get together again or anymore, or try to be a community. I mean, that's sort of the underlying question in the air, right? And the one thing we do know about your community is that you won't be able to form a community around your shared beliefs. You don't have many. The community that you form, if I understand it right, it's really formed around a shared value system. We value loving relationships. We value the process of thinking intentionally about what matters to us. We value caring for the needs of other people. We value creating space for people that may be lonely. You value all those things. Like, I have a community like that back home. And we group our values. We used to only have 3 values. Our values were loving relationships and doing work that makes things better for other people, and cultivating gratitude and cultivating wonder. And we didn't come by those randomly. We looked at a bunch of scientific studies and found out that those 3 things are the things that characterize people that live the longest and register the highest levels of well-being at the end of their lives. And we're like, yeah, that's what we want. So we decided, and we realized that, like, even if you have values, most of us don't live out our values unless we surround ourselves with other people that share those values and support us in doing so. So whether you're trying to lose weight or get in shape or, sell lots of Amway, you need to gather with other people that share that value. But over the course of time, we added a 4th value. And when you asked me if I believed in God, it was the only value I thought was worth sharing with you, because the other 3 you've got. The value that we added was this thing we call worldview humility. And worldview humility says this. It says, I'm happy to tell you that I don't believe in God. And I'd be happy to tell you why, if you want to know. And you want to know the experience by which I came to not be able to believe in supernatural forces. And why I don't have evidence. I could get it. And I really don't believe in God. Like, I would stake everything on that. I have kind of staked everything on that. Right? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't know. I can't prove it. I can't prove it to you. But I also can't prove to you that Justin Bieber didn't deposit $10 million in a Swiss bank account with my name on it. That's a possibility too. Justin Bieber has that kind of money. My name is in the phone book, and there are Swiss bank accounts that will do that. It could be true. The only thing I can tell you is that I don't make a single decision in my life based on the idea of being a millionaire. I live as though there is no money there because I don't really believe that there is, even though it's possible. And that's how I kind of am about God. Like, I'm open to the possibility, but I don't make a single decision based on the God thing. I really believe that. But here's the thing. Although I think that my worldview is true, I figured out that that's not why I believe it. I didn't do some exhaustive study of all the worldviews in the world and did a careful, rational analysis and picked that one. I don't believe my worldview is true because it's true. I believe it because of my unique set of experiences and my temperament and the way I was raised as a kid. And honestly, if you had my brain and my temperament and my experiences, you wouldn't believe in God either. Like, I can't take any credit for it. I was shaped this way. I'm not able to believe those other things. But the thing is, like, if I was in Afghanistan and I was raised in a little village and everyone around me believed in Islam in a serious way, and I was educated into that, and all my childhood experience was that, and they created rituals and things in which I experienced Allah in that format and stuff, I would believe that and not this. And so when you see somebody with a different worldview from you, you may go like, how can you believe that? And what you should understand is that, how could you not believe that? How could they not believe that? You go like, well, why don't you believe? If I really think I'm right, but I know that I don't think I'm right because it's actually right. I really do think it's right, don't get me wrong. But that's not why I believe it. And so you have to have a little bit of humility when you encounter people in the world. And I would say that one of the values that you want to have in a community that's built on loving relationships is that everybody has a little bit of humility, that you value that. And you say, like, listen, it's not so important to me what you believe, it's how you hold that belief. And if you can't hold it with a little bit of humility, with a little understanding about how people really come to have their beliefs and how real a belief can become to you if you want it to, then you don't really fit in our community. I don't know if I think I mean, the answer to your first question was really easy. Do you believe in God? But what I'm trying to answer is like how I don't believe in God, if that makes sense. Not why, but this is how I don't believe in God. And I got to tell you, it's a really helpful thing if you're going to live in a world or be in a family with people who do. So maybe that's where I stop for now.
There's a lot of questions already submitted.
Okay.
I had a quick follow-up. Thank you for your start. It's a great start.
That was a thought.
This is a great thought. I'm just curious if you could maybe expound a little bit on like not choosing your beliefs. So, because I think that maybe we have at least I do. I want to think, maybe, and you could call this ego, but I want to think that I choose my beliefs consciously, or I've intentionally chosen. I believe these things because there's evidence and there's reason and there's support for my beliefs. When you say you can't change your beliefs, but your beliefs you can arrive at them basically, I'm just curious if you could expand a little bit more on that.
I don't want to say you have nothing to do with it, because like, you guys familiar with the Stanford prison experiment? Right? And by the way, it's totally been discredited and it was terribly run, and anybody that quotes it is an idiot, so I shouldn't say much about it. But the truth is that the Stanford prison, it's sort of like the O.J. Simpson trial in the sense of like, did they frame him? Yes. Was he guilty? You be the judge. And was the Stanford experiment done terribly? Yes. Is its essential truth true? I think so. And the essential truth was this, is that they took two groups of people that were pretty much identical, and they made some of them prison guards, and they made some of them the prisoners. And over the course of a week, the roles that they gave them shaped their behavior, and the prisoners became morose and sad and despairing, and the guards became abusive and contemptuous of the people that they were taking care of. And the point that the study made is that our circumstances shape our identities, shape our feelings, okay? Now it's interesting, not shapes our thinking, okay? Didn't change anybody's mind yet. But here's the weird thing. If you change the way a person feels, anybody that's involved in therapy, anybody who's involved in behavioral change, anybody will tell you that the way you feel ultimately influences what? The way you think, the way you see the world. So if I can mess with your feelings, I can mess with your beliefs. I can mess with your worldview. I mean, that's how I became a Christian. Like, I didn't walk into that youth group and they were like, let us give you 18 reasons why Christianity is a plausible worldview. I mean, they couldn't have done that to save their lives. They loved the heck out of me. They gave me adults that showered affection on me. They put me in a support group of kids and they told us that we were going to change the world. And we sang these big songs about love and meaning and stuff like that. And I was loved into the kingdom, not reasoned into it. They changed my feelings. Then they can mess with your mind. Feeling, and so I guess what I'm saying is that on some level, you have some choice, because you can look at a group of people that are treating each other a certain way and you can say, I'm going to go spend time with those people. And you go like, why? It's sort of like in the Stanford prison. There's the guards, there's the prisoners. You want to be morose? Go stand with those people. You want to become aggressive? Go stand with those people. You're like, is there a third choice? And the answer is there are choices all around us. Do you want to value relationships? And do you want to cultivate gratitude? Maybe choose this group of people. Because that's ultimately the most choice you have. Your choice is not whether you will be influenced by your context, right? Or whether, if you read that book, it may change your mind. You're like, well, you could choose not to read the book. And that's what I did for most of my Christian journey, is there were books out there and I chose not to read them. I instinctively knew, you don't want to, so what we do is we protect ourselves from influences because we know we're influenceable. So I don't want to suggest that you don't have any control over who you become or how you're shaped, but I got to tell you, most of the heavy lifting is done before you have any idea what's going on. It's like that John. You ever watch that movie High Fidelity? It's a great scene in it where John Cusack's yelling at his ex-girlfriend out the window. Actually, an ex-girlfriend who's not there from his past, and he's saying he's listing all the people that have broken his heart, and he finally gets to his present girlfriend, and he says, "Yeah, I just listed 5. You breaking up with me hasn't touched me. If you really wanted to get to me, you had to get to me when I was really young." And that's how it is. If you really want to get to a person, you get to them young. And that's how, that's the beginning of most of our spiritual journeys. Somebody getting to us while we were young.
Hey everyone, it's Kristin. Just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning in. I hope that you're finding these messages helpful for you in your everyday life. That's what we're trying to do here, is gather around the idea that life is a gift and love is the point, and let's give ourselves ways to move forward in that in our own everyday world. So I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being a part of this community. To those of you who have participated and given financially, we want to say thank you to you. Everything that we do here happens because people make contributions. People say, I value this place, I want it to exist for me and for other people, and so I'm going to support it. And so we just want to say how grateful we are that you do that. And for those of you who maybe haven't had a chance to contribute yet, we would ask you to consider maybe doing so. If you find this place beneficial, if you find these messages helpful for you, then consider joining us in that way. You can go to eastlakecc.com to make a contribution, and we just always are thankful for the people who want this place to exist. So thanks again for tuning in. Let's get back to the message.
I gotta get a follow-up here. A lot of questions. These are great. I'm gonna start.
Oh, cool. I'll make the answers way shorter from now on.
That's great. You're doing great. This is going exactly how I wanted it to.
Yay.
I'm curious. Here's a question here. What's your take on the sacred? So just that idea of in your worldview, are there things that you hold sacred now that you've been away from Christianity for a number of years? What does it look like to hold things sacred? Right. That's a term that I think comes from our story upbringing. Christianity certainly has this idea of certain things are sacred and certain things aren't. Is there still a role of things that are sacred in your life now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got these friends at Harvard. They don't go to Harvard anymore.
You do? It makes one of us. I don't have any friends at Harvard. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about how the joke I was making about you were this big mega church and now you're this, and how you were saying, and that's sort of the story of my life, my whole career. I never showed more promise than when I was 21 years old, going to an Ivy League university, and my career has been just less relevance ever since. I just keep shrinking. But there was a time, yeah. So my friends who are still relevant at Harvard have this group and what it's called Harry Potter, a Sacred Text. I don't know if you ever heard of these people, but what they do is they were all Christians. And when they left Christianity, one of the things they missed the most was Bible study. Bible study was really cool. I don't know if you ever remember Bible study, but you would pick a section of the text and you would read it. And the task was to figure out what this text, how you could apply this to your everyday life, right? So it was a shared text and historic text. And they were like, yeah, we don't believe in any of that stuff. We don't believe those texts are true. But it was really cool taking something out there and trying to figure out what does that mean to us. And it meant different things to us at different points in our lives. And so they started doing it with Harry Potter. They were like, there's a book we've all read. And it's about morality and friendship and relationship and overcoming evil. And so they would pick a passage of Harry Potter and they would treat it like a sacred text, and they would read it and talk about it. And then and they would go like, what do you think Ron meant by that when he was saying that to Hermione? And they would go like, okay, so I think that the message of the text is this, or at least what I take from it is this. Well, how would you apply that in your relationships? Well, I have some people that I need to be loyal to too. And this is what, and they found that it worked very similar to them. And what they said, and it reminded me of the teaching of Karl Barth, the great Protestant theologian, who said that the Bible isn't sacred because it was dictated by God. He said what makes a text sacred is when a group of people use it in a way that changes their lives. When I was a young man, I went to the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and they had Abraham Lincoln's hat there. Like the hat, that was his hat. And I looked at that hat. I stayed there for hours. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this is one of the great human beings. And there, he had worn that hat. There was nothing special about that hat. That hat was made in a factory. There were 1,000 more like it. What made it special was what? Who wore it, how he used it, right? How it was used. So here's the thing. A text could become sacred if a group of people used it over and over again in a way that made them better. My friends at home, we're collecting sacred texts. You say, oh, do you just pick a really great Mary Oliver poem and say like, boom, it's sacred? You can't do it. That's not how it works. You take a text like a Robert Ingersoll quote or a Mary Oliver poem or any sort of thing that moves you, and you share it with a friend. Maybe it moves them too. And then maybe in a conversation a week later, or a month later, or a year later, they bring it up and they go like, it's like that Mary Oliver thing. Oh yeah, I sent that to my mother. And she said, and some texts within a community, they circle around and they get used over and over again. And pretty soon people go like, that's built our community. We keep quoting it to each other. It's more meaningful because I remember when you said it to me when my kid was in the hospital. And then, I remember, and then you brought it up. And then at her funeral, she wanted that same passage read because it had meant so much to her. And the text becomes sacred because we use it in a community of shared values that love each other. And so like what I say is like, I don't say that their texts aren't sacred. I say that if you can't believe in God, you probably need to come up with some new sacred texts. And you go like, oh, I'll just do that myself. You can't. Something can only become sacred in the context of a group. It can be special, it can be meaningful to you. But it can only become sacred when it transcends you, when it becomes bigger than you, when it's going to get passed around by your community even after you're gone. When I was at USC, I was the chaplain there, and we had this lovely fellowship that we built up there. And I gave a couple of the kids this book that I thought was really important. It's about worldview humility in some sense. It's a book called The Righteous Mind by a writer named Jonathan Haidt. Have any of you ever heard of this book? Have any of you ever read this book? Can you see why that would be a great book for a group like that? So the kids loved it. It changed the way that they saw their families and their parents. It gave them respect for people that were different from them. It changed them, and they passed it around. And new kids would come in the group, and they would go like, what's this all about? Yeah, you should read this book. You really, that's kind of what we're into. And that book became kind of like part of the canon of that group. I bet you if I hung out with the Eastlake insider crowd, I bet you there's some things that you go like, yeah, that's kind of in the canon. We've all seen that movie. We've all read that book. We pass that around. It's important to us. That's what I think sacred means. And I think like a place can become sacred. I don't know if any of you grew up going to the same vacation house every year and you built a level of memories in that place, and it's sacred to your family. And if it burns down, it hurts really badly, and you can't replace it because it's special. Like I think that that's what we do as human beings. We're as tribes. Tribes make things sacred, and they're sacred to a tribe. And once again, worldview humility. Just because something ain't sacred to you, doesn't mean it's not sacred to somebody. And so you have to treat it with respect.
Do you have something that comes to mind when I'm like, what's sacred for you and your family?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a few things, but if I was going to say a text that was sacred to us, yeah, I would say the text that would be sacred to us, it's terrible. It's called Coming Home, and it's by Mary Oliver. And my daughter had it at her wedding, and my son had it at his wedding, and my wife has sent it to many of our friends. And it's a poem about being at rest in a certain kind of relationship. And it's the kind of relationship that our family values above all. And so, yeah, that would be a sacred text in our family.
That's great. There's a couple different questions that all speak to the same thing. So what would you recommend? Oops.
It's not called Coming Home, it's called Providence. I get the name wrong every time. I'm sorry.
Good, Mary.
Because I know some of you are like, wow, I want to laugh. What's that poem?
Google it, yep.
Go ahead.
What would you recommend for interacting with people who don't share your worldview? So whether that's you do believe in God and you are hearing Bart talk right now, or the alternative, you would say, you know what, I'm agnostic, or I wouldn't say I have a strong God belief, but my parents do. That'd be an example that's close to home for me, or my in-laws do, or my whatever best friend does. How do you recommend interacting?
Okay, this is, I guess, the product placement part of this thing, because like I've thought deeply about this subject. I actually wrote a book with my Christian father about this subject. We made a documentary film called Leaving My Father's Faith. Would you like to watch that movie? I have a podcast called Humanize Me, and half the episodes are about how you relate to people who believe differently than you do. So if you would like me to sum it all up in a paragraph, screw you, it's my life work.
It's fair, it's fair.
I will give you this though. I mean, like, the worldview humility thing is a good start on it, is what I'm saying. But like, here's the main thing is, when you have to tell somebody that you believe differently than they do, there is a tendency that we have to assume that they're going to be negative about that, and to present it defensively, and to sort of proclaim it, to sort of defiantly say, well, you know, I don't believe in God. What are you going to do about it? Or to say, well, you know what, I am a Christian, and doggone it, and to present it. And what I have found is much more effective in terms of opening the conversation and building the relationship, but also in terms of making your belief system seem attractive, which, you know, we all have that little evangelist in us that are like, if we're cool enough, they'll want to join us. Right? Yeah.
Once you are, you know, smart as me, you'll arrive at my beliefs too. Yeah. That's the opposite of worldview humility.
So this is both kinder and also more strategic. Confess your belief rather than proclaim it. Go like, you know, I can't believe in God. Not I don't or I won't. That's like a big, you know, screw you. Like I think it's no, I can't. You know, if I was able to, I probably would. But I can't. Like, I'm not able to. You know, some of me, I tried everything I could. You go like, well, what if you're a Christian? And you go like, you know, I know it's crazy. I mean, even my Bible says it's foolishness. But I can't stop believing it. Like, it rings true to me, or like I can't get it out of my head. And believe me, the secular person that you're talking to, they'll understand, because if they're anything like me, they're like, I don't believe it, and I still can't get it out of my head. I'm haunted by the God I don't believe in, right? Like sometimes I'm about to have fun doing something, and he calls me not to do it. And I go, wait, you don't even exist. But we struggle, like, and I know a lot of people that are like really scared of going to hell. That really are worried about judgment and all that. And it's like it's not rational, but it still works upon us. So I think like in some ways to confess, to say to the person like, look, I can't help being this way. I'm sorry. You know, I don't mean to offend. I'm kind of stuck with this. Because then it invites the question like, well, what happened to you? And then you get to tell your story, which is a much better thing than telling your beliefs. People are really interested in your story. Most people could care less about what you believe, but they're interested in your story. It's a much better way to have a conversation about spiritual things. It reminds me of this joke. Do you know the old joke? Guy goes to a psychiatrist, and he says, "Doc, it's my brother, man. He's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken." And the psychiatrist says, "Well, why don't you bring him in?" He says, "I would, but we need the eggs." Just because somebody's belief isn't true doesn't mean it doesn't work for them. And that's the other thing about like all this like trying to convert other people to believe what you believe or not believe what they believe. You better be really careful about that, right? Because they may need the eggs. Okay? They may need the eggs. So, like, just because a belief system isn't true doesn't mean it doesn't work for you. Alain de Botton, the great sort of secular writer, once wrote, I think he said, the most boring and unproductive question one can ask about any religion is whether or not it's true. The real question is whether it works and how it works. And the thing is, like, you have a nice little community here. I hope you know that, like, in the whole wide world, there are maybe like 7 of these. There are not a lot of places for people who don't believe in God to gather with people who are committed to loving relationships and trying to figure out how to make themselves better and how to be servants of their community. That doesn't exist a lot of places. So if you blow somebody's faith up so that they can't fit into their church anymore, what do you got to offer them? You say, well, do you ever help people become secular humanists? Sure. When their faith is so broken that they can't ride it anymore, I'm going to go like, oh, there's another way to pursue being a good person. Boy, some of the people that come to me, man, all they got is a taillight out. They're like, I'm giving up on Christianity because Christianity doesn't accept gay people. And I'm like, man, I got a lot of Christians. I got a church over here. Here's a book. Like, you can be a Christian and accept gay people. That's a workaround. They go, but they're distorting the scripture. I'm like, yeah, they're all distorting the scripture. It's okay. All right. But the point is, like, if somebody and they go like, why are you trying to help me stay a Christian? I go like, your mother's a Christian. Your father's a Christian. Your girlfriend's a Christian. Your husband's a Christian. Your children are Christian. You love church. You sing in the choir. Like, you would be better off if you can stay and it's now. Again, the question. Not if your Christianity is making you into a racist, awful person, but half the people I know, their Christianity is making them more loving and more kind. It providing them a consolation and it gives them a structure for their lives. It keeps them off drugs. Be careful that you take away somebody's belief system unless you've got a community and a worldview to offer them that's going to yield the same benefits. I mean, I spend my whole life trying to come up with forms of secular community that will provide guidance and morality and consolation in the face of grief, because that's all this life is at a certain point. It's just a lot of grief. And the older you get, the more grief there is. And you need something. And the thing is that all those new atheists, they're really good at explaining why Christianity is bullshit and poison, but they're not really good at telling people what to do when their sister just died. Now, I think there's a lot of good secular things you can say to somebody when their sister just died, but not many people know how to say them yet. And so you just got to be really careful. There may come a time when you can casually proclaim that Christianity isn't the best system, but there better be some place for people to go if they buy into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Good.
Wait, I see a guy with his hand up. Now, does he get to jump the line, or does he have to wait a few?
I'm comfortable. Brian's been around.
You get to jump the line.
Let's go for it.
So what did you say when your sister just died? Yeah.
Ah, there you go.
That's a great follow-up.
I'll tell you what I say to. I'll give you the worst case scenario, and I'll tell you what I said. The worst case scenario is when you're dealing with a young parent, and their child has just died, and there's nothing you can say that makes that a good thing. And so the first, and this is one of the places where I love not being a Christian, because I don't have to do any apologetics. I don't have to explain how somehow a loving God allowed this to happen or caused this to happen, and it's part of some larger plan. I'm really grateful to be free from that nonsense. But what I do say is this. I say the first thing I have to say is, this is a terrible tragedy. And I'm so sorry, and nothing I can say will make it better. I know that. But I do want to say, not in this moment, but I do want to say a few things. And the first thing I want to say is that, like, my understanding of this world is that of all the energy and all the matter in the universe, a very, very small percentage of it ever gets to achieve consciousness, ever gets to be alive. It's an incredible privilege to be alive. It's incredibly improbable. When I was a Christian, I used to sometimes wonder why you only get 90 years. It seemed like, shouldn't there be more? But like, honestly, the fact that we get a moment of it, the fact that we get a day is incredible. It's a miracle. So one of the things that I say is, it's a tragedy that your child didn't get more life. It's a tragedy that they didn't get more life. But I'm still glad that they lived at all. Most of the time I ask young parents, I say, given the pain that you're in right now, do you wish your child had never been born? And they always smile and say, oh, no. No, even the ones that lose them a day in or 2 days in say, no. I'm glad they exist. And I said, the thing is this. The pain that you're in right now is a reflection of the fact that you loved that child. They got to experience the highest thing in the universe. They were loved. And even if they were just a little baby, like, there's all sorts of studies that would suggest a baby hears those words. They don't know what they mean, but they feel the love. Like a baby that's loved responds differently than a baby that's not being loved. So your child, they got to experience your love. And that's not nothing. And that's not nothing. And so I say, like, I'm really sorry. It isn't enough. But it's something very precious that you shared, and it honors you that you're hurting this way, and it honors your child. And you're like, does that help? Not much in the moment. But a lot of times people come back afterwards and they say, that was helpful. And they said that one of the things that's the most helpful about it is it gives me something to say to myself and to each other when we just are lost. That isn't, this is better, or God needed another angel, or any of the bullshit that people say to you. Because like, the funny thing is, most of my Christian friends, when they hear me talk about this stuff, they say, you know what? We hate saying the stuff we're supposed to say. It doesn't ring true even to us. It's very painful to say those things. You say, well, why do you say them? Because we don't know what else to say. So to some degree, that's some essence of it. It has to do with like how precious this life is, and that it's so precious that even a little bit of it is better than nothing. And the fact of the matter is all of us, you know, there's a finitude to all of us. And it's precisely that finitude that makes life so precious. Ingersoll said really well, he said, you know, if we were to live forever, we might never love anybody. That it is precisely the knowledge that the feast must end that makes us so anxious to connect with each other. And so like, you know, like death is sad, but death is part of the bargain, and it's a really good bargain.
I love that. I think it's beautiful. A couple things you triggered, I think, that are interesting. We'll go down a couple of different paths here. One is the question here about belief versus faith.
Yeah.
You kind of distinguish between belief versus faith. So you were saying if we can't choose our beliefs, at some level we arrive at our beliefs, or our beliefs are chosen for us, or we kind of arrive.
We inculcate them, yeah.
Yeah.
They're
So what's the role of faith then?
In Tanya Lerman's thing, what she's like is like, belief is like in your head. Faith is like your experience. It's an experiential thing. And what she would say is that faith is primarily generated not by ideas, but by practices. Does that make sense? Like, it's by going through. I mean, Jewish people, you know, like it's funny. Like when I went secular, all my Jewish friends were like, oh man, you know, because I'm losing my career, everything's out the window. My Jewish friends were like, oh man, it's so sad you weren't a Jew. So you don't have to believe anything to be a Jew. You just have to do the stuff, right? Like half the rabbis that I know don't believe in God. Oh, that's genuinely true. Like that's a real thing. Secular rabbis, you're like, why? Because they go, that's God's problem if you believe in him or not. If he wants you to believe, he'll give you the faith. If he doesn't care, he evidently doesn't care. What matters is, do you keep kosher? Do you practice? Do you observe the rituals? Because the rituals are what hold us together. And the rituals are what keep us out of trouble. And the rituals ultimately take us to the right place. And so she's like, faith is what gets generated when you go through the motions. You're like, well, that's what sucks about like being secular, is like there are no motions to go through. And I go, oh, you better invent some really fast. You better invent some for yourself really fast. And you go like, you mean like getting together once a month to sing songs and listen to somebody talk about what makes life meaningful? Like, that might not be a bad ritual. In the Harry Potter Bible study, that might not be a bad ritual. You go like reading a sacred text. That might, how about a mindfulness meditation every morning? That might not be like, you go like, but why do I have to have a ritual? I mean, like, there's no God imposing it. Like, no. It's not that God imposes the rituals. It's the rituals that create God. And if you want to have a secular value system that serves that function, that tells you what's right, and it guides you, and it gives you consolation in the moments of trouble, you better come up with something so that because the thing is that when the chips are down, when you're in the struggle, right? When the chips are down, you can't think it up then. It's just got to be a part of you. It's just got to be muscle memory. So you got to read those texts over and over again so that when you need them, they're right there in your head. You got to remind yourself that your life is about building loving relationships and doing work that matters and cultivating gratitude, so that when your kid and you are in a huge fight and he goes like, I don't even know what this family is all about. You go like, this family is about these three things. And you say, what? So that's what a religion, like what an academic would do is they would say, here's a lecture. Let me tell you this information that's really helpful to you. That's going to change your life. But a religious framework says, no, I'm not going to tell you a different thing every week. I'm going to tell you the same thing 10 times a day until it becomes a part of you. And when you're secular, the good news is that you don't have to have that imposed upon you. You get to decide, but you get to decide what you say 10 times a day. You don't get to decide whether you have to say it 10 times a day for it to become part of you. That's just part of being a human being. You don't say it 10 times a day, it's not going to become part of you. You think all those religions are crazy? You think Islam is still around because it's so logical? Do you think Christianity, it's because it builds in 5 times a day you pray? It's the rituals that make a faith come alive. And you go like, so are you trying to build a secular faith? Yeah, I'm trying to build a faith in loving relationships. I'm trying to build a faith in doing work that makes things better for other people. I'm trying to build a faith in gratitude. I'm trying to build a faith in worldview humility. And what is the faith? The faith is that if we do these things, our lives will have more meaning than if we don't.
That's good. That's good notes.
Do you sense
exactly, right?
I'm trying to preach this because I miss being a preacher, but it's not really that. It's that preaching is a different thing than lecturing. And if I was reorganizing Eastlake, I would make sure that you tell your people that look, it may sound like a lecture, but be sure you think of it like a sermon. Mm-hmm. Because you see, a lecture is supposed to make you more informed. A sermon is supposed to change your life.
Yeah.
It's supposed to change the way you live or reinforce a change you've already made, right? And what I'm saying is we've got to learn to talk to each other with emotion and with feeling and with we've got to learn to manipulate our emotions. You go why do you want to manipulate your emotions? Because it's the emotions that change the behavior, that change the thinking, that change the emotions. It's all mixed up together, and we just don't do enough feeling stuff. We secularists. We think we're all in our heads. We're all in our heads.
I got a good follow-up question here.
Okay, wait, can I, before you do that?
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? What's our time
I think
situation?
we got 15, 20 minutes more.
Okay.
So I think we're okay.
Okay.
And obviously, nobody's got a seatbelt. So if you got to leave and you're ready to roll, you got to roll. My wife leaves immediately.
Oh, no, look at it. She's like, get me the hell out of here.
No, it's okay. She's doing great. She's super offended by the last thing you said. I just do so.
No, it's just probably true.
She's being she's helping kids, and our child cares up. I have a question for you. It's a follow-up to what you just said last, because you were talking about those 4 values and, and living meaningfully. And this feels a little bit connected to our conversation earlier this week. 2 things you said. One was we get to take a vacation from non-existence. Like life is a vacation from non-existence. And I just found that to be such like a meaningful sentence, because I think we think of life as short as opposed to thinking of non-existence as long, right? So like our default status is not consciousness. Our default status is actually non-existence. So to get 75 years, to get a year is a gift, which sounds a lot like life is a gift. But one of the questions that came through here, which felt similar to something we discussed this past week, was with the loss of heaven and the afterlife, where do you now find hope and motivation for this life? So I think for those of us maybe that grew up quite religious or Christian, the thing was the afterlife. We're living for the next thing, right? So like, do you feel like, did you go through a grieving pattern of like, I don't like have a reason to live and now I have to find it? Like, what's your like purpose and motivation now without maybe the God structure?
I understand the question, but I like don't understand the question. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of this, like, I understand the question because like having the heaven thing out there was a big deal for a lot of us. I was just with an evangelical friend 2 days ago, and he's a missionary in Guatemala, and he has just given up everything. His kids were raised far away from their grandparents. His wife and he lived in fairly kind of like social isolation because they were dealing with all these gang members, and they were with people they cared about. It's just a mess, and he's just sacrificed everything, and it's all for the afterlife. And it just breaks my heart, you know. To watch him do it. So I understand the question. But the truth of the matter is, like, I always say to some kid says to me, if there's no heaven, what's the point of this life? And I'm like, did you go to a movie last night? Like, because if I tell you, like, this movie's going to be over in 2 hours, do you go like, well, then what's the point? I know it's finite, but it's still a really good movie. Like, you enjoy it. There's a beginning and a middle and an end, and like, it's something. And I think that's a little bit like, my thought is like, does the fact that this life is finite, like somehow evacuate it of meaning? It doesn't to me. And so this is the harder question. And maybe it's related to this. And if it's not, bring that question back. Because a lot of people say to me like, what do you, but if there's no God, then what's the meaning of all of this? What's the meaning of life? Not, right, what's the meaning of life? I do not believe that life has any meaning. Like, I don't believe that there's somebody out there who created all this purposefully with a purpose in mind. I don't think there is any purpose to life, to this universe. I believe there's a great deal of meaning within the universe. We create that meaning by caring about each other. And so meaning is completely subjective. You mean something to me if we develop a relationship. If I care about what you think, and if I'm hurt when I see you get hurt, or if I'm happy when I see you get happy, you mean something to me, and I can mean something to you. And we generate that meaning by caring about each other. You can have a baby, and you didn't care about that child. That child didn't exist, and 10 months later, it pops out, and you're like, I love you. This baby is very meaningful to you, and you created meaning. You've created something that's meaningful to you, and as it grows up, you will become meaningful to it. And so, like, you have invented meaning. You have generated meaning sui generis, out of nothing, right? We are the meaning in the universe. We are not the meaning of the universe. We are the meaning in the universe. And so, like, if somebody says to me, what's the point of my life? I go like, from externally, there is none. You will die, and 100 years from now, no one will remember you. And millions of years later, the planet itself will be burned up, and everything that you've created and every book you ever wrote will be consumed with it. There will be no record of you in the universe. You matter not at all in the broad scheme of things. But you can matter to me, and I can matter to you in this brief moment. And so all the meaning that is available to us is right here and now, and it's made by loving each other. And so if you want to have a meaningful life, you've got to commit to love. because that's how meaning is created. And so it's like that's the thing, is that like without heaven to motivate me, you know what motivates me is? What motivates me is running out of time. This is it. This is my shot. This is my chance to create connection, to create meaning. And you go like, don't you want to leave a mark? No mark will last. You're plowing the ocean. And nothing's, you look behind you, it's nothing. Conan O'Brien tells a vivid story of going to Calvin Coolidge's grave in Maine. And it's this little grave, and it's grown over, and nobody goes to visit it. Nobody knows who Calvin Coolidge is. And he was the president of the United States. At one point, he was the most powerful person on the planet. Nobody cares. And we're talking like not even 3 or 4 generations later. Like, you think anyone's going to remember you? You think you matter in the broad scheme? But you could choose right now to walk out there, make a new friend, and you could really matter to that person. I could introduce you to kids in my neighborhood that are so desperate for somebody to care about them that even if you're not really gifted, if you just showed up, you could become one of the most significant people in their lives. Easy street. Like, if you want meaning, no problem. You can be you can be meaningful. I can make you meaningful in a heartbeat. That's not the issue. The issue is if you want permanence. And if you want permanence, you should look to a different religion. I got nothing to offer you there.
I love that question from whoever submitted it. I have compassion for it, and I've felt it similarly because I was talking with you this week about what we were going to talk about this week, and one of the questions I asked was related to essentially I feel like I gave God credit for living intentionally. So I assumed that because I believed in God, I filled that God bucket with, I live intentionally, I have these habits, I have these goals and values, and I head down this path because of my belief in God. And you reminded me that, well, there's plenty of people who don't believe in God that still live intentionally. You didn't own that. Just because you had your belief in God, that didn't mean you were the only person that had values that you tried to live out. So I think that question about heaven just kind of reminded me of our discussion a little bit. And it kind of made me want you to, maybe if I could spur you towards the idea that you talked about how love, maybe we can wrap on this note, is just how love is your best strategy for living a meaningful life. So love is not, essentially love is the most strategic path to having as many meaningful experiences in the brief window of time we have on planet Earth.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear about something. When my friends and I, when we get together and sort of share this value system, this is our way, okay? It's a way. It's not the way, okay? And I want to tell you that, this may be the most important thing I have to tell you on this worldview humility thing. Because, I gave up believing in God a good 5, 6, 7 years before I gave up being a fundamentalist. I was a fundamentalist Christian, then I gave up Christianity, and I became a fundamentalist atheist. And what I mean by that is not I became militant and angry. It meant that I was on a desperate quest to find the one true way to make the most of this life. Because there is just one way, There's one right, best way to make the most of this life. And I was bound and determined to find out what it was. And I studied all the science stuff, and I came to the conclusion that it had to do with relationships and love, and stuff like that. And then I met an autistic kid. A really high-functioning guy, but couldn't connect to save his life. He could do math, he could make money, just. Now, if I say to him, listen, the key to life is building loving relationships, it's just foreign to him. So for him to make the most of his life, he's going to have to take a different path. Now, he can still contribute. He can do work that matters, and he values that, and he wants the admiration of other people at a distance. He wants to publish papers that other people read, and he recognizes, he wants the recognition in that world. But he does not want to talk to anybody. So I better not make love the kind of love we're talking about. I better not make that my idol or my icon, or he's screwed. Think of it as like a bell curve. You know the bell curve thing, right? You've seen that? Like for most people in the middle, like loving relationships is really crucial. Like, and most people, if they're isolated or lonely, their lives fall apart. Like look at COVID, right? And it damages people and it takes people time to recover. Some of you are like, I'm having trouble recovering right now. Like I wanted to be with people, but like I ran out of energy about 30 minutes ago. Could I go now? And I'm not kidding. That's what, right? Our stamina for relationships is low down. But that's a lot of people. But there's some people for whom COVID was wonderful. They're so glad they didn't have to be with anybody because like the whole world became like Asperger's. Everybody's cut off, everybody's isolated, and they were like, I know how to do this. Okay? And there are other people at the other, like, you know, I got a friend who's a pedophile, okay? He's a straight up pedophile. He's 60 years old. His whole life, all he's wanted to do is have sex with 13-year-old little boys. He's never done it, okay? He has denied himself. He's never told anybody that he's a pedophile. And so he's lived in complete isolation. Like who he is has been so distorted and messed up because he's trying to do the right thing. And like you could judge him for and you'd be crazy. He's a moral hero. He's a paragon. He's sacrificed so much not to hurt anybody. But like you can't have this is the way. There's no one way. Like what, for him to make the most of his life, given what he's got to work with, he's got to make one set of choices. This Asperger's guy is to make another, and you and I, we get to do something different. So I think when you have those values, like love is the best strategy for the most people. It's the one that evolution, by the way, sort of like that's our great adaptation. We don't dominate the world because we're stronger or because we have bigger teeth or because we can fly. We dominate the world because we're so smart. And the reason we're so smart is because we have these really big brains, way bigger than could ever exit a woman's birth canal. So what we evolved to do is have children with little tiny brains that can't take care of themselves and don't know anything. And the way we did that was by evolving that the kids would be so cute and that we would have these hormones that would make us love them so that we would nurture them for 5, 10, 15 years before they were able to, 20 years, 35 for some of your children, I'm sorry. Right? But our love, and so the brains were able to get bigger. And so we were able to do all these things, cooperate, build all the stuff. Because we love each other. Love is is the human adaptation. It's our survival strategy. And once you recognize it, and you go well, if that were the case, then we would feel unhealthy if we were isolated. We would become depressed and morose. Right? You go well, then what if they developed a technology that isolated us from each other, that made us want to stay home and read articles about each other instead of being together? You go well, then you'd end up with a lot of people that were hugely entertained and loved Facebook and were really depressed and anxious most of the time and couldn't figure out why. You see where I'm going, right? So love, the thing to do about love is to take it out of the realm of airy-fairy poetry and think about love in a really functional, practical way. As this is and you have to almost define it. Love has to do with actively be willing to make sacrifices for the well-being of somebody else, because their well-being will then cycle back and trigger a bunch of endorphins that make you feel good. Love is this thing where you go my DNA stands a better chance of making it if you're doing okay, because you're in my tribe. So it's really selfish. My love for you is self-interested. My DNA says loving you is a good idea, and yours says loving me is a good idea, and our DNAs are right. So love is this instinct, love is this practical need, love is like food and air, and you ignore it at your peril. And so so it's when people are asking me how can I live long and prosper? I don't tell them love because it's a moral imperative because God called me to it. I just go look, I've seen the research. You better figure out how to make some connections.
That's great. I had another question connected to that, and it was just a question about...
I feel the energy in the room just dying as I'm speaking.
You ready?
I do.
I don't think so.
No, I see you. I feel you. You're dying. And so
Let's wrap on this.
Could this be the last one?
Yeah, this is it. This is the last one I had.
Okay. Bless your heart.
Are you dying? It's okay. We can wrap. No, we're not.
I'll tell you what, what we're going to do is we're going to end this up after the next question, right? And everyone's going to get up and drink some wine and eat some stuff like that. And like all the people who the energy still have it can come back and we'll play more. Yeah. And like it'll be you and me, right?
Yeah,
so that's fine.
No, it's true. I want to end on this, but it's true. Like we're going to be around. And people can bail or people can stay, depending on your energy levels. Okay. Just the last question was related to what do you share with your kids about faith? Like if you don't, and it may be those 4 things, those 4 values that you've highlighted. I think the last one is worldview, humility, cultivate gratitude. But I'm just the question. I'll just read it verbatim as opposed to my interpretation. What do I share with my kids now that I've lost the idea of an angry God who needs me to accept him into my heart? So like, what are the things that you tend to share with your children, or what would you recommend for somebody who's maybe exiting a more fundamentalist or more Christian worldview about living a meaningful life?
I don't know if any of you have ever listened to my podcast. If you have, you've met my son, Roman. And you don't say anything to Roman. He says stuff to you. No, my son is like 29 years old, and he's just, he's a really interesting dude. And my daughter's 32 now, and she's like the best therapist I've ever known. And so like what I said to my kids when they were little, and I think what I encourage people to say to their kids is to start with the idea of like, because what kids are trying to figure out is like, what is this family about? Like a family needs to have sort of a crest, a purpose. Like, what are we here for? And I think like one of the things that I try to teach my kids is like, we're here to take care of each other first and foremost. Like we're here to help each other thrive and become really good. My parents didn't raise me to love my sister or her to love me. They thought that they didn't know that was their responsibility. They didn't try to build us to each other. They just nurtured us individually, and we didn't actually love each other at all until I was 45 years old. And that's a whole interesting story that I'd be glad to tell you sometime. And now my sister and I really love each other a lot, but it's a crazy thing. I was desperate for my kids to love each other. And so the first thing I taught them was that in our family, like, these are the people. This is your smallest circle. And like, we're here to love each other. We're here to help each other grow. We're here to help each other. And like, that was the most important thing. But the second thing was this worldview humility thing. I was like, look, Papa believes in God. Rainey believes in God. Like all the people around you, there's a lot of them believe in God. Some of them, and the people up the street believe in Islam. And the people, like, you're going to hear a lot of people tell you a lot of different things. And here's what I'm going to tell you is true. What's true is nobody knows. Nobody can prove anything. But people believe what they believe for a reason. And you need to respect. You need to respect that. You need to be curious about what other people believe. But nobody knows for sure. And so if anybody tells you they know for sure, they're full of it, and don't listen to them. And that was the most important thing I wanted to teach them is like, not you get to choose, because you kind of don't. But that like everybody gets shaped different ways. And so we would meet people who were really harsh and militant and they would go like, what a jerk. And I'd go like, listen, he's doing the best he can. Like he was raised to be that way. Like everybody comes from somewhere. And that's, I think, the most important thing that we teach kids about religion or about faith is this idea that everybody comes from somewhere and everybody believes stuff for a reason. And you're probably going to end up thinking a lot like me. And it's not because I'm right. It's because like I'm in the dominant position in your life. And you go like, do I want you to end up thinking like me? I do. But the reason is not because it's right, but because it's a language that we share. And like, if you end up believing like me, like we'll always have stuff to talk about, and like we'll be able to prod each other in different directions. And you go like, well, you're making it seem like you're sort of creating like an unfair advantage to your belief system. Yeah. Yeah, because it is an unfair advantage. Like, you know what your kid wants most of all when they're little? If things are going in any way right, is they want your approval. They want to be like you. they talk the way you talk. That's what they want, and they're hardwired to do that. And so like I go like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. If my daughter was running around wearing a hijab, would I still love her? Yes. Would it be easy to hang with her? It would not. So like I'm not, privileged position to our belief system, but I'll tell you what, our belief system, one of the biggest principles of our belief system is nobody knows. Nobody knows. And anybody that says that they do is lying to you.
Back to that worldview humility piece.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And back to, and now the question is, did my kid look at me and say, do you believe in God? Back to your first question. Absolutely. And I said to him, I can't. I'm not able to. I used to, but I can't now. But if you do, like people do, and they have good reasons for doing it. And like, if you go on some retreat, you might have an experience and you might experience God and then it would become real to you. Like that's what happens. And that's okay too. I just can't.
That's great.
No, you don't get to. It's a follow. You get one follow.
God, how do you define God? What is it that you don't believe in? I understand the white dude in the sky with the beard and just saying that's not what God is. How do you define
I'll break it down even more. I don't believe in any form of supernaturalism because I've never seen any evidence for any supernatural reality. So I just don't believe in anything. Like I believe in evidence. And I believe in stuff that I can grasp. And like I know I don't understand very much. And you go but like they talk about the God of the gaps. We're like, these are stuff that we know about like science, and then like we didn't know where lightning came from, so we said it came from God, and then we figured out where lightning came from. We were like, okay, that's actually just lightning. But God now is this. God is whatever we don't know. Like what I call whatever we don't know is what we don't know. But I don't have any reason to believe. Every time they told me it was God, then they figured out it wasn't. So I just don't believe that there's anything like that. So, but I say when somebody does tell you they believe in God, it's really important then to ask, tell me, like not just to go, you're wrong, but tell me like what kind of God do you believe in, or what does God believe in? For two reasons. Number one is half the time the person tells you they believe in God, when they're done talking about God, you realize that they just believe that the universe is sacred. And you're like, okay, well then if that's what you want to call God, I can't call it God because I had such a background in religion and I was such a famous religious guy that if I did that progressive Christian thing and said, God, but what I really meant was the universe, all the people that ever heard me would go like, he believes in Jesus rising from the dead and all this stuff. So like I have to call it what it is or else I'd mislead people. But like if somebody calls it God, like half the time that's not what they mean. The other reason you want to find out what they believe in is because when somebody tells you what God is like, it will tell you nothing about what God is like, but it will tell you a lot about what that person is like. It will tell you a lot about, because people project onto God their most deeply and cherished values. So like when my dad tells you about a God who like wants to feed the poor and loves gay people and stuff like that, it doesn't tell you who Jesus is. So you can make Jesus whatever you want it to be. You can underline these verses and forget these verses, and then you can underline these verses. And you can make Jesus whatever you want it to be, but it tells you a lot about that person. And so that's one of the reasons it's very important to be curious about what kind of God people believe in. This was just, I can't tell you, like, it's amazing to me that, I know that when I'm done, you'll probably clap. And
I'm going to ask them to, Bart.
Right, and you'll make it like, thank you for coming and all this stuff. I can't even tell you what a privilege it is to get the opportunity to share stuff that you've thought about a lot and that you've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about and try to figure out in counseling sessions, things like that, and to get a chance to actually have a group of people say like, what have you figured out? Like in all that thinking and stuff. Like it's such a privilege to talk to you. I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity, and I want to thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Great. Love it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a perfect note to wrap up on. Thank you so much for being here tonight. So for those of you that want to hang, we do have the place for another half hour or so feel free to grab another beverage. We'd love not to throw those desserts in the garbage. So grab a Ziploc bag
or skunk the beers.
Shove them in your pockets. Drink the beers. We're hanging here for a bit. We do have a survey that we'll put up on the screen here. It's eastlakecc.com/survey. It will be helpful to know why in the world did you attend tonight, and how much do you or do you not ever listen to Eastlake stuff. So if you get a chance, fill out the survey, it'd be great. But more than anything, thanks for being here tonight. Grab a beer on the way out, and thank you, Bart. Cool.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.